Hello, Chloe.
Hey there, how you doing?
I am doing quite well. How are things in England?
They're good actually. Yeah, not too cold, and I managed to make plenty of time to draw maps today, so that makes it a good Sunday.
It's a win-win. Yes.
Yeah, win, win, win.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I think I was planning on meeting a while back. I was planning on having a Kickstarter
Yeah.
in July and it got pushed back. I was in Northern Ireland and that was quite an experience.
Oh wow, I've never actually been to Ireland or Northern Ireland. It's on my list of places to go. Beautiful country there, I'm told.
Oh, yes, it is. In fact, I was riding in a bus. We were in Newcastle and we're coming this gal, she works for a what do you call them, it's a bookie, what do they call it, uh it's not well, it was a bookie, but anyway, going through the countryside is very beautiful, and the cows and the rolling hills, and where your country, well, your country, but where Ireland, in Northern Ireland, is different, is that I think it's because it's so old. There's hedgerow boundary lines for fields. And so there's this pattern of these long rectangles.
Yeah, stunning. The patchwork with the hedgerows and so much wildlife in them. And actually thinking about it, I've never done a map that's included hedgerow divided countryside, and I'm definitely doing that now you've mentioned it. That is genius. Because that'll
Well,
look great, right? That'll evoke The Hobbit and home counties, and yeah, I think that's a great bit of inspiration there.
the thing I also realized is we stayed in Belfast. We were there for 7 weeks. We stayed in Belfast, and so where I live, it's on the plains.
Mm,
So we have space. So everything's on a grid.
mhm.
But in Belfast, it's like that makes no sense. But when you look at the map, I think what happened is it grew out of boundaries of farms. I'm wondering.
Uh, Actually, I think you're exactly correct on that, because a lot of time I spend a lot of time looking at old maps. I spend a lot of time trying to draw inspiration from historic maps. And so when you look at a map of somewhere like Belfast, or I've looked a lot more at somewhere like London, depending how far back you go, you've obviously got a different view of the city developing. And exactly what you describe, you don't have to go back that far. And just south of the Thames, um, it is a farming village, like London Bridge, a couple of
Yeah.
houses, farms, and all of the streets and centres and names, originate from the farms and villages that eventually became the bigger urban centre. Whereas in America, they planned them. So I drew a map for 1920s New York, and it was really interesting going back and seeing how at the start of the 20s, they had marked out all of the blocks. They have exact records of all of the of the grids where they were filling in city blocks, but a lot of them were only partially built on. It's like they'd planned it out, knowing that it was going to expand
Right.
in the time frame of 5, 10, 20, 30 years, 50 years, whereas London grew without planning organically over 1,000 years. And yeah,
Yeah, well, I
it's
think that the city planning, at least to that degree, right, I think is more modern, because I think Chicago benefited from the fire
yeah,
because they were able to rebuild, and when they rebuilt, they modernized the structures and how they built.
that's interesting. I haven't read about that. That is interesting. But it's super fun when I'm drawing a fantasy map for someone to think about this and try and put some of that history into it and think, oh, we had a village here. I did a fantasy version of or a kind of darker version of somewhere that was a bit like Boston. And that had the grid structure, but it was also interesting to try and imagine that, well, maybe there was a farming village here and the grid's going to be disrupted at this point, and, breaking it up a bit. It's
So
fun to think about these things.
so is it, and I'm not done. I know people who I think have lived, I believe, in Boston, but is more the city center? Is it get to be more bizarre with the connection of streets, and it becomes more planned as it goes out?
Yeah, I mean that's what I did. It was inspired. It
Yeah.
wasn't Boston. It was Boston-like. It had a new name, Titan City, but it was
Oh, okay.
it was like in the same way as I don't know, DC Comics have caricatures of various cities. It's quite obvious that inspiration that someone like Gotham City is taken from. This was like that. The brief was, okay, we're starting with Boston. That's pretty cool. I like Boston, but we're gonna do it differently, have a different geography and a different history, and perhaps a different layout, but it still wants the same kind of zones. So yeah, the old unplanned city center right at the heart that grew, and then various sections of the city that grew out at different times and have different, I guess, texture to them. Fun. It's so much fun to think about this stuff, and it's what makes the map interesting, like deeper, without people realizing it.
So what we have is we're on a plain, and there's also a river valley. And so for Peoria and also like East Peoria, the upper city is on is on the plain, but when you go down to actually the floodplain, where it starts hitting the river, roads start getting all jacked up because they no longer follow that north, south, east, west. And when we were in across the river from Ohio or Cincinnati, it's like the roads were so jumbled. Like I'm assuming it's more like London, where it's just like, you get odd number of streets intersecting, and it's just like you're expecting a road, but it's an alley, but the alley's a road, and you turn like 5 lefts to get where you think is to go right. It's just like,
yeah, no, absolutely fascinating. And of course, London was cleared out in a giant fire, and it still ended up like that. So, but yeah, that's where it goes.
Yeah, I think I've on Twitter I saw that you were this is I think a little while back. It was, can't remember when I guess it was earlier this year, wasn't it? When we did the
Yeah,
maps.
it's like I think early, right at the start of the year.
So you were doing these it was like very detailed complexes, I think, for like a cyberpunk or
Oh
sci-fi
yeah,
thing.
I can talk about who that's for now. That's for Freddie Prinze Jr., the actor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know. So before I was like, oh, I'm doing it for this client. I can't say who. And but it's he replied to one of my tweets and said, yeah, they're for me. It's super cool working with him. He runs a cyberpunk-like fusion of road racing and augmented kind of cyberpunk people game with some friends, and he may want to do something with it commercially at some point, but he wanted some really detailed maps of a corporate building for infiltration missions and a nightclub, and they were so much fun to do. And I've worked in corporate buildings in London, so I knew I started with a vision of a very famous building in London. It's called the Gherkin. It's that kind of oval shaped one that you see in all kind of city centre London footage of big business. And the thing that inspired me about that is it had the lifts in the centre in a circle. So I started my design like that, but went for something that was more of a kind of cone shaped. And he loved it. And I know he sent me photos of the maps printed out massive for his gaming table. And it's pretty cool, right? It's like
Right,
it's pretty
it's
cool.
not abstract. You just didn't do something that sits on his hard drive. You
No,
actually
I know he's used it, and maybe we'll do some more in future, maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Not just because I was doing it for him, that's awesome too, but it was a really interesting brief, and he was game for me going for this blueprint style I tried out, because I wanted to do something that was still hand drawn but also looked futuristic. And yeah, I'm very, very pleased with those maps. At some point I need to get my act together. At some point I need to use them myself to run a game. I thought it'd be quite fun to run a kind of Die Hard like game in the skyscraper, kind of set the players loose. I don't know what system, and say, okay, it's like there was it Nakatomi or whatever. I can't remember the name of the building in Die Hard, but
yeah.
basically set a small group of players, make them roll up, I don't know, business characters, an accountant,
Oh, yes.
and they'd say, okay, now terrorists have taken over the building. What are you gonna do? Because this map's got elevator shafts and access tunnels and, you know, places for you to hide and improvise attacks on guards. And, you know, then maybe you can write, ho, 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 I found a machine gun on the lift. Yeah, in fact, I should do it for Christmas. Have I got time to set that up? Yeah, I should run that game for Christmas. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
The best
It's
Christmas movie.
it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways games have kind of gone away from that level of detail.
Yeah, I like that though. I like running a game where the detail's down there and you're not. I mean, it's nice to make up a lot of it. I think Freeform is awesome, but it's like if you've got a really detailed map, which takes time to pull together, even if you haven't drawn it, you do have that, I don't know, emergent gameplay and opportunity when the players discover that perhaps if they smash through this wall, it's going to take them into the boardroom, which will allow them to get a drop on the terrorists. You're unlikely to think that up as something, you know, they'll use the map to solve problems. So for those kind of dungeon crawls as well, I really do like a detailed map.
Well, I found, because I don't play much D&D, but when I did, somebody revealed that we were in an inn. It was in the upper story, but seeing all the furniture, you know, like inspired ideas or thinking, or if it was just, you know, like I would tend to do, just draw a rectangle and say, you know,
Well,
I think there's definitely advantage to having those details on a map.
yeah, although I mean, much as I love to draw maps and it is fun, I don't think you need anything more than rectangles.
It depends, I think. I don't think you need, but I mean, I can tell where you're giving up one thing for another, but there is inspiration in details, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, there is. And sometimes the innocent details then become something, you know, that enriches the story in ways you couldn't possibly have planned. But I mean, you know, the players will you never expect what they're going to do, and they will try and burn or blow up something. And if you've got detail that might tell you that that's a really flammable room. A kind of cool conversation we got into with these maps for Freddie was he had this kind of computer core you know, research area where only the secure lifts would go to. So we had this concept you had to go in through kind of the exec entrance to get there, or you had to, if you came in another way, you'd have to swap over. But I thought, well, what's a kind of cyberpunk research computer? And I thought, you know, there's these quantum computers. They already look quite incredible. So I'll start there, and they need cryogenic coolant. So you've got all these coolant tanks around the layout of this computer core map. And then, you know, then we're thinking, well, what happens if there's a firefight and these things are punctured? And you look it up and it's awesome. You're going to have this extraordinary emergent situation where everyone's going to be suffocating as
quickly
cryogen evaporates. And, you know, like without placing those things innocently on the map to cool the computer that might be the main target for the infiltration, you haven't got that wonderful situation where a few stray bullets or a couple of clever, deliberate players' shots then drown out everyone apart from the robots that have sensibly been left there to guard. Yeah, it's that's what the detail brings you.
Well, you know, I work for a major corporation, and we have to take safety videos, even though I'm not involved. One is called it's for I came up for contained spaces. So, and they're very dangerous. Like any sort of like area where you don't have an exit, and there's also gases a lot of times tend to be heavier than air. Like the ability to like die is like pretty high if you're in a certain situation. It's not that uncommon, but you're right. It's just, you see on the map, it's just like there's all sorts of opportunities, and that stuff is deadly. So you could make really deadly stuff with just very little thought.
Yeah, and that's fun because players may think of that, or they may not have thought of that. It may be an entertaining surprise when they realize they haven't got any air in the building. It adds to the drama. It's good. I like it. So yeah, actually thinking about it, I really want to run that game. I want to, die hard start game in a futuristic cyberpunk style building in Los Angeles. Cool. It's gonna happen.
So what sort of game system do you normally run?
Do you know, I haven't touched anything other than D&D for a while. I used to play a long time ago at university, which was a long time ago. And then I stopped. I completely got out of it, got into other things, and it was only really just before lockdown, I got back into a game with sort of 6 months before lockdown with some of my old friends from when I was growing up. And so yeah, I've been playing and D&D and I ran a couple of games. But we used to play. I used to love Call of Cthulhu. I used to love GURPS. I know that's out of fashion at the moment, but I liked the detail of GURPS.
Yeah.
We did play a bit of Cyberpunk. Yeah, but it's a lot of it's been D&D, and at the moment that's all that's going on right now. But we can do better than D&D for the die-hard game I want to run.
You have GURPS.
I still have GURPS. I have, yeah. I don't know. I think I might have gone off it a little bit. I was looking through the rules. They are really detailed.
Yes, they are.
Combat looks like it might be a bit of a chore. I think, yeah. I don't know. I think back in the day, Dungeons and Dragons was so abstract and frustrating. I think what they've done in 5th edition, I think really has taken off the problems I had with it to a point where I'm less attracted to other systems so aggressively. Whereas, yeah, GURPS was, we used GURPS for a lot of science fiction games, like kind of hard sci-fi.
Right.
A bit like, yeah, The Expanse, but, a few years ago before I thought of that. And yeah, it was good for that. Really good for that.
Oh yeah, I played the sister or cousin, the hero system. So kind of adjacent.
That looks good. Yeah.
But it's still a, I won't call it a variation of GURPS, but it's that same path, maybe even a little bit more convoluted. So it's
yeah. I mean, maybe someone's already done it. It's almost like it's a happy medium between GURPS over complexity and yeah.
Well, so the people that do The Expanse, they have modern age RPG, and I think that's kind of that might be a good one.
Not tried it. I like the look of The Expanse though. I love the books and TV series, so I'd love to do some maps. If anyone from The Expanse is listening, do your spaceships.
Yeah. So, are you doing this? Part-time, full-time?
Moment it's just part-time. I keep toying with the idea. I think I could have enough clients to go full-time, but do I want to take it from big hobby to everything? I don't know. It's a big jump. So at the moment it's, yeah, I have a commute to work on a train and I draw maps on the train. It's good, like on my iPad, because I do it all on the iPad.
Oh, that does work really well then.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I have an hour journey on the train in which I would probably fall asleep or read books, which is cool. And instead, I'm much to the confusion of whoever's sitting next to me, drawing maps. And that can be quite confusing because sometimes I'm looking at pictures of skulls and, like, because, I mean, I'm not saying that some of my clients want me to draw some truly disgusting things, mentioning no names. Like cabins of poo.
Yes, exactly.
So, occasionally you have to look up reference source material and skulls and bones. I've got loads of pictures I found of skulls and bones because I can't remember what, I don't know, an elephant skull looks like unless I look it up. So
yes, speaking of mounds of poo. This whole Fane of the Fly God was just I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with it.
No, you shouldn't have to defend it. I have to say that I was thinking of doing a post about my kind of top weirdest requests from clients, and I think you might be in a number one.
Feel free. Because the whole thing was done with the idea of, let's just see how far I can go and how far I can push.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think players will love it. I think there's so much to, especially if you give them this kind of disgusting fly maggot poo-ridden scenario and describe it just deadpan. They're just gonna, it's gonna be, I mean, you could run it as real horror, you could run it as disgusting comedy. I don't know. It's got
Yeah, I think that's just it. It's and really I can't remember. So what did you what did you see from the thing? What I can't remember. Did I give you the whole PDF of it, or did I give
You
you?
did, and I skimmed a lot of it.
Yeah, I couldn't expect you to read all that.
No, and that's fine because I got a good briefing from you on the rest of it. But it was quite cool because there was other themes of dead, wasn't there? There's the tombs and the in the hillside, and which are quite evocative of kind of primitive societies, burial rites. I like it. Yeah, it's good. It's a lot
Yes.
in there. It's good stuff.
Glad you enjoyed it. I think seeing some of the stuff you've done, I thought you'd be a perfect person to do that. So you went with two directions as far as the cross section as well as the overhead view.
Yeah, it's fun to do the cross section. I think that also it speaks to play. Although it's hard because we had a lot of movement forwards and backwards in the plane to kind of jumble around and fit in a cross section. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. But,
So why do you think that was harder? What was the difficulty?
I think we had a like we had some things like, for instance, we had some rooms that when you looked at them from above, there was a central circular chamber and then lots of rooms coming off it. Well, that's hard to communicate in a cross section.
Oh,
On
right.
its yeah,
Right.
because so it's almost like you need both views, but you don't. You want both maps to stand on their own because nobody's going to cross their eyes and try and look at both views. So you have to think, oh well, maybe we can have some steps down to some of the rooms to give off that vision of a central chamber, and then entrances into a cross section. Up and down. It's kind of hard to imagine how the stairs would go. So, but I think it worked.
Oh, I think so too. I think the other thing is it's quite apparent because I realized before I contacted you, I started trying to just draw a map out of my head, and it just wouldn't work. So it's easy to look at a map and say, yeah, anybody could do that. But when you actually try and do a map that works, it's really not easy.
Yeah, and I mean the process of taking what's in the creator's, the client's head and figuring out what it looks like on paper, I am discovering is harder than you think some of the time. I think we had a rhythm and figured out the layout, a few iterations, we got there quite quickly, but I'm discovering that, some clients and I are on completely different planes, and that's not a criticism. That's just we're thinking in different ways, and so it can be quite hard to work that out. And so yeah, getting on. I'm as I think I was saying earlier, getting on Zoom, drawing things together. I've just been drawing, on because there's an application within the drawing application Procreate. You can draw on 3D surfaces. So drawing on a globe in order to map out very large continents, because the globe isn't flat and I've got to project it later, but just to figure out the geography, I'm learning and figuring out techniques like that to more quickly get to what's in the client's head. Because of course the most destructive thing is to draw the wrong thing and then have to
Yes,
redo it.
right. Nobody's happy about that.
No, it's soul destroying. And you're like, I love this. Look what I've done. No.
Yeah, and I think what happens is as we get more experienced, I shouldn't say. I mean, ideal is as we encounter these things, we think about how did we get here and how to mitigate it in the future.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of fail fast to succeeding here in sort of getting rough sketches, but it's still sometimes the vision and the problems of the map aren't apparent to the client until until they've seen a more full version, sometimes even right into color, and then they realize, oh, I hadn't realized that part of the city was going to be so big. Great. It is. What can we do about it? Well, maybe we can move this section, or maybe we can change that into a castle, and then that deeper, that's a challenge. But it's good fun.
But I think what I've realized is, if like myself, who would be hiring freelancers, I am not necessarily used to communicating uh, to uh, to the freelancer, and so you want to give a right amount of information. You want to give enough clarity because it seems very clear in your head, but you also don't want to over give either because that can create its own set of problems.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. If you have too many constraints or things you've got to fit in, that can be difficult. It's a balance, and it's something I think I'm getting better at, for sure. And sometimes it just works. I drew a black and white map of a city with a lot of detail in these levels for a client who wanted it for her game that she was going to run, and it was almost like just by luck. Every time I said, "Oh, what do you think about this?" and showed her a sketch, it was perfect every time. And I don't think she was just saying that. I think it was just luck that we had the same
I think there's
image
some
in our
people.
head.
I think what happens is there's also times where a person doesn't know exactly what they want,
Yeah.
and then you provide it, and they're like, "Now that's what I mean." There's some people who probably tell you what they want, but maybe what they're telling you what you want isn't really what they want.
No, absolutely. And that's wow. I mean, that's part of the service. I think. I think that's part of what I need
Uh,
to, realize I'm doing. It's not just the drawing. It's understanding maps and geography and town centers and continental movement and mountains and helping them figure out what's going to look right.
Well, yeah, because I had a situation. The person remained nameless. Nobody knows who it is, and not even the person. But so what I'm looking for I'm doing a sci-fi zine. Is I asked for what I want to do is have articles on specific topics of planetology. And so if you go to Traveler, it talks about a world being, say, having tainted or thin air.
Mm.
So what does tainted or thin air? What does that mean for people living there? What does it mean for plants? What does it mean for things to survive? What does it mean for equipment? What does that have? I asked for that, and then I gave him something else, and he just went off on this wild direction, wrote it in one night,
Oh no.
was not what I wanted. He got upset. I'm like, I also sent him links to the writer's guide, which he didn't read. And then he started reading through those and was making all sorts of just weird. I don't know. It was just the weirdest thing. And then he was talking about a kill fee. And I'm like, you didn't provide anything. I finally said, he's like, kill fee, and then maybe we'll figure something out sometime down the road. And I'm like, no. I'll pay a kill fee only because I want this behind me, not because I feel I owe it.
Well, I mean, and it's not to blame any individual.
Right.
If you're not gelling, actually, you are better off moving because you know you need to find someone that you gel with that gets you on both sides. So yeah, I kind of get that.
Well, it felt like he was giving me what he wanted to give me, and there was never a look at what I asked for. So instead of me getting an article on tainted and thin atmospheres, I got a overview of our solar system.
Yeah. And maybe there's someone else that he could work for that doesn't know what they want and just want someone to create things for them and
Right.
needs,
I'm not. But what I
and
realized though is what I should have done, and I don't feel that necessarily at fault. But going back to how do you mitigate this?
yeah,
Is next time I have somebody do it, it's not part of the community, I'll say, you provide me an outline before you do the writing.
yep, 100%.
That would have fixed that. It still doesn't.
It would reduce that. I
It
don't think,
sure would.
yeah, a lot. And I think it's the same with maps. I think I need to get a little bit stronger on, okay, we're at a point now, I need you to sign off, especially when I've done, because the way I work is I like to get the line work done kind of first, right down to detail. So we lay out the rough layout, and that rarely does anyone want to change that. And then you get the detailed line work in. And at that point, I can cut and paste and shift things around. And quite often I've thrown in stuff I've drawn from other maps and changed them. It's quicker than you think to get a lot of detail down there. But the coloring takes a long time. And I put color down and then texture down and then shading and then shadows and then highlight, and all these layers are done one after the other and build up the kind of rich view. Well, moving something when you've got all those layers and shadows on buildings and, you know, statues self-shadowing themselves and all this
Right.
stuff that I'm trying to make it look right. Oh, that's a nightmare. So what I need to do is I need to have a kind of, okay, we've got the line work. I need you to look at it. And I know it's harder to look at because I haven't colored any of it, but I need you to just check, is this right? You can see everything. It's going to look just like this, but colored. Because having to shift, even, you know, oh, can you make that bridge sort of rotate it by 30 degrees? Really, no. Um, I mean, I can, but what I've got to do is basically delete all that bit, redraw it, delete all the shadows, delete all the shading, delete all of that, and that can be quite, you know, because the bridge will put shadows on the buildings next to it, and
Yes.
yeah, so that's one of the things I'm learning is there's a point at which it's very easy for me to make big changes even, but beyond that, I need it to only be very small things.
Well, I would say what you could do, which may help when you say to review, saying any changes I will gladly make, but you'll be paying an hourly rate for it.
I
You know,
could, although, yeah, I could. I have thought about that. I mean, people who want changes late, they're very, you know, like they're often, yeah, I'll pay extra. Yeah, that would certainly help, but I don't really want to do changes.
no,
Like
but see, the thing is, if you just say look it over to make sure it's right,
yeah,
they're not going to say okay, no big deal. But they say, wait a minute, this
yeah,
could
that's
cost
true.
me some. They're going to be more incentivized, I think, to review.
I think I get too relaxed, and that's where I've hit that. And then of course, you know, and I want it to be. It's so important. It's right. I don't want someone to be upset or annoyed that something's in the wrong place. It can ruin their feeling about a map if, oh, I didn't realize that was the, you know, that was the inn. I thought the inn was going to be near the port. Fine, I'll move it. I want you to. I really want you to enjoy this. I really want you to be. I don't want you to have a niggly annoyance with it. So, yeah. But you're right. I should have a kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll get it right at this
this
point.
is a point. Maybe even this is whatever that point is that this is a you know point of no return, so to speak. I guess there are opportunities for changes, but because right, you don't want to just go yeah, and then it's like
Yeah. But so far no big problems like that. Um, yeah. And it is good fun. And sometimes I'm asked to do changes that I think, oh, that's rubbish. That's going to make this map less good. And then I do it and think, oh, actually, you know what? I quite like it. I wouldn't have thought of that. Or
yeah. I'll tell you what. Right, I think it is amazing. Really, what sometimes that collaboration. So the first artist I worked with for cover, well, actually the first one I hired, um there's a number of back and forths, but in the end it turned out really good. It was just because it's I think as long as you have the person on the other side being reasonable and having at least a clear understanding of what they want, I think that can lead to some pretty amazing combinations.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it should be that the sum of two people's creativity is you know is more than they would achieve on their own. It should be able to like bounce ideas and end up with something really quite inspired. And that's when it's really fun. When you feel like I like it when I'm drawing a map that I feel I haven't seen before. Um, like I was. I mean, that's why one of the reasons I quite enjoyed doing cross section view. I hadn't seen a cross section map out there for since thinking back to like second edition D&D when I remember seeing some of those,
Right.
you know, with numbered rooms, and it really struck the imagination. So I was really excited. Oh yeah, we can get a cross section on this, and I think that's something that people haven't seen for a while.
Yeah, I
And
agree. I never played second edition, but you're right. Going back to first edition, I remember seeing that at times.
yeah, well, I managed to buy when I was playing because I started doing D&D kind of later on in second edition, but I got hold of a whole load of first edition books, which was great because so much interesting material. And yeah, there were perhaps that's what I'm thinking of. Certainly, I remember seeing cross section maps that I was like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, there's a for some reason my memory is missing me. The Dark Tower was put out by Judges Guild, and I forget the gal's name, JK, read her last name, but she's known for doing some very cool things with maps and multiple ways of getting to the same places. And she did a really cool cross section where you're actually going down one temple, going to the bottom, crossing over, then going up to the top of the next one.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I like that. It conveys a lot. I think that's really cool. And as we said before, I think you have these details. If you got the cross section, you can see what room is below another room, and maybe they did some disastrous spell and knocked a hole in the floor and triggered the encounter below, which you'd never want.
Yeah, I think that's just it. And that's what I think too. It's like, not playing in a 3D, you can see where the 3D environment, going back to his details inspiring, but I think the same thing with 3D environments. It's like you start seeing flagpoles and this and that, it's just like all of a sudden you're like, hey, what if I were to do this or climb the drain to go up to the top of the roof? And you don't necessarily think about it when you're just seeing a flat, two-dimensional map.
And the players will, and they'll think of the thing you haven't thought of, for sure, and that'll help them. Yeah, though one thing I am like, you can take this to an extreme. I do like the simplification you get from, I don't know, kind of maps that aren't trying to look photorealistic. And I do worry about, these virtual dungeons that are, extraordinarily rich 3D animated environments, but you're constrained in what you can put in there. And I don't know. I like the game not to be like a computer game. I think that's really important, even if you're playing online. I think that's one of the things I like about the maps that still look hand-drawn. I think there's something quite nice about the fact we can play this game with just pens, paper, and dice. And yeah, if you've got animated monsters being kind of moved towards you, I think that gives you something, but I think you lose something else.
So what they did early on, like Expedition to Barrier Peaks and a few others, is what they would have is actually pictures when you get to certain rooms, and you'd show the players. So it could be what the room looked like. And that's what a friend of mine did at a convention. We were up at the top of the scroll. It showed this is what you see, and then you can look at it, and then you can, in your mind. So, maybe you don't have to give a full detail of all the buildings, on a street, but if you had somebody just draw a picture of a street,
that's cool. And yeah, that is cool. I mean, and again, you can do that at a table. It's not, it doesn't have to be, because obviously you can throw pictures around when you're online, but and I like handouts, like Call of Cthulhu. I love making cool handouts. I haven't done it for a while. For Call of Cthulhu, letters and and bank statements and whatever else, with evidence, with lots of red herrings. That is fun.
Well, if you're looking forward to supplement your income with the map, you could also try your hand at something along those lines.
Yeah, well, I would be up for that, actually, because it's not that hard, and I think that's fun. Put little details in. I was terribly upset. I made some really cool letters for the D&D game I was running, and the players couldn't read the handwriting I'd used, and then asked me to translate into text. I was like, I've just given you a handout. Read it or don't read it. and their reply was comprehend languages on my handwriting.
Yeah, like, my kids need comprehend languages for my handwriting. So,
like, yeah, this wizard's written to you. She's not going to have good handwriting. No. It's going to be doctor's handwriting. Deal with it. They did.
That would be kind of funny. Like, let's say, here's what I was just thinking, it would be funny is it would take a lot of time to do that, but it'd be interesting if you could create a penmanship and then write a letter in a way that the penmanship could easily cause people to misconstrue.
But that wouldn't be that hard. Kind of fun. Yeah. So, that would be good, actually, isn't it?
Is she telling us not to go, or is she telling us to go? I can't tell.
Very important that you take the ink splodge door. Which door? Do not, do not get this wrong. Oh, I like it.
Yeah, it's you know, it could be that people who, maybe there's just some people who just don't do well, with handwritten communication. It's probably true in life where people are great
Yeah,
talking to, but
it is. And I'm sure wizards would be bad at all forms of communication. But I think there's like crazy scientists. But yeah, actually, you could do something where with punctuation. You know how you have those phrases like the famous one, panda comes in, eats, shoots, and leaves.
yeah.
And put the placement of commas completely changes the sentence. You could do something like another version of that.
Well, also I realized going just a little bit of time that I was in Northern Ireland is just the I was called like the idioms and such. They're just a little different, and it's just like I kind of get what you're getting at, but I'm not sure.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of differences in the common language. It's good.
Yeah, so you could just throw in some weird phrase, and people are like, "I'm not sure what that means."
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I spent a summer in America a long time ago, when I was at university, working on an amusement park, doing rubbish but fun jobs, and I learned a lot of the differences, the hard way. Occasionally comes in handy.
I bet that was quite an intense experience. What city were you in?
So I was at the amusement park in Ohio, so Cedar Point, and yeah, it was good fun actually. I made some good friends, had some good adventures. It was good.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because most of the people that what I was there, of course, they're much older than you were in school, and the big thing is New York. If you want to go to New York, routes to take drive Route 66 because the amount of space this country is just kind of blows their minds, and then sometimes Florida. So those are like the
Well, I did
things.
some of those. To be fair, we flew into New York, and with this work exchange program, we were told not to hang around in New York because we were told there were more jobs elsewhere. So I went to the amusement park. I thought that would be fun. But it drove down to Florida afterwards, which was good. Did one of those things where you can be paid to drive someone else's car because they want it moving at the end of the season. And so I can't remember what car it was. It was a group of us. This giant American car, because of course all the cars are bigger there than we see in the little British streets. So it was quite fun to drive this thing that to us felt like a tank. Road trip from Ohio down to Florida to drop off this person's car.
So a funny internet game is I think logically it's not. I mean, it's not true, but one thing that's funny is usually there's a feeling that people in Florida are crazy. And so if you type in Florida man and a date, you'll get some news report that just is outlandish.
Oh wow.
Like Florida man uses alligator to try and rob a convenience store. Florida man.
I mean, that's brilliant. And to tie it back into our handouts, crazy news stories are perfect for Call of Cthulhu handouts and misdirection if your players are too good. Throwing in some weirdness that just happens is the best way to just make it a little bit harder for them.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of that out there. So we've been playing. So you played it a lot back in the day?
Yeah. No, I played Call of Cthulhu back, I think when it was second edition, or I had second edition. Is it what, 6th or 7th now? And yeah, I played because I love the books. Yeah, it's great fun. I liked running it. I wasn't a very good player back then. I was destructive. So it's better that I was running the games. But yeah, I liked I never played any of the big scenarios, but a lot of the smaller ones, plenty of them around Arkham, we've tried out. So
if you're interested, there's a variant we'll call it. It's a different company, but it's called Delta Green.
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't really know much about it.
So it's the idea is like certain things happen, and the real reason, we think the reason is X, but the real reason is Y. And so you're kind of investigators with the government. There's part of the government that's the American government's trying to research the Cthulhian stuff. There's another group that's trying to stop them. And so there's this kind of turmoil going on, but like really any sort of, major disaster or weird incident could just be tied
Okay.
to, they figure out some way of tying it to some sort of
So
mythos.
is it more modern era generally? Is it?
Yeah. So and what's kind of interesting is when we played in, for instance, we went to Afghanistan, but at different time frames, it all fits. Like it's the same situation where we were military. I think we were playing military advisors going to Afghanistan, but it was during the time of the 80s, with Russia, but it also ties in later on with the 90s, or with the 2000s, sorry, not 90s, when we were actually, in Afghanistan, training troops. And so it's like, it's kind of weird how some of these historical things, like we're back in the same situation.
Wow, the history repeats itself, doesn't it? Well, that sounds really good. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, that does sound. It sounds a bit kind of like X-Files meets Cthulhu.
Yes, actually, very, very much so.
Oh, that would be cool. That could be really cool.
And I think the idea is you could even do the same thing with things around, in around, that you're familiar with, that same type of idea where, like maybe in London, maybe the tunnel was closed for 5 hours. For what reason? And they said, well, it was a water main break. Well, it wasn't a water main break. They were actually something else. And now you're the people have to go investigate.
I like it. That sounds really good. I think, yeah, I think the thing I liked about Cthulhu is it was nice to run a game where the players genuinely seem to value like history and research skills more than gun skills, because they knew that when it got to drawing the gun, they'd already lost. But
yes,
that you just had to try and outthink it. It's good.
You're right, because many games, and I think many they don't lead to that. They lead for more, I guess, the adrenaline pumping kind of experience of combat.
Yeah, and I think you can do that, but it's only certain kind of players really enjoy that, the role playing and the investigating and the mystery side of it. If you're really into those parts, with a little bit of action for fun, because I personally don't think the system is all that. It works, but the setting is great. And so when you get into combat and you're rolling against your percentage and not much seems to change, it doesn't feel that exciting. But that's a good job, because you're going to die anyway if you're in combat in Cthulhu.
Yeah,
you're already dead.
There's also one called Achtung Cthulhu.
Oh yeah, that's more. Is that more kind of
World War II?
Oh, World War II.
And they've done it both the Cthulhu rules, they've done Savage Worlds, they did Fate Core, and I think they just came out with a 2D20 system. But that one is, and they got random adventure generators, so you can, play out different things out of World War II.
I mean, so much possibility. I mean, there is a GURPS Cthulhu. That must be the most deadly game in the existence of the planet, because GURPS is unforgiving. You're one stab wound and you're out. So I shudder to think what it's like fighting.
Well, it's interesting about
old ones,
because when you're using more modern history, I think it's much more easy to get like NPCs and such. Especially when we're tied to certain events. So if there's like a Romanian, the one took place, the adventure took place with a Romanian student. They were kind of rebelling against the Nazis that had occupied. Things didn't go well, but you could put those people in there and tell their story in a way that's, I think what's kind of neat is you can tell people stories of actual people and teach a little
That's
history.
really interesting. Yeah, and that's another level, isn't it? And that's pretty cool, particularly when you're looking at historical events and things, to take an angle and reflect someone's story or their struggles. It's cool.
Yeah, I think probably for me more as a GM, probably more than the players. But it's like, you know, I was running this one, you know, this one kid, and it's like, you know, in real life, in a few years, he's dead. You know, it's kind of interesting, you know, thinking about those types of things. Like, I never really played with real people before, but when you kind of do, I mean, with people that, you know, the history is more, what's the word? It's got more gravity. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of interesting. You don't want, on one hand, you don't want to make it just a, what's what I'm looking for. You don't want to downplay or make light of the situation. But on the other hand, I think it's a good opportunity to highlight the situation and that people.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly challenging. If I do get around to running a Cthulhu game, I want it to be in the 20s in Harlem in New York, and the source book Harlem Unbound is extraordinary source book, inspiring, but it covers in great detail how to handle racism in the 20s. It gives you different ways that you can manage that, and it's written without saying to ignore this, without trying to cover up the extraordinary life-threatening difficulties at the time. And it's just brilliantly, I can see that being another layer on the game that I probably wouldn't have thought to put in, because I wouldn't have had that perspective. But reading that source book covers exactly that. Doesn't shy away from it. It says, you're in the 20s in New York. This is a thing. Here's how to make your game good and, you know, fun to play. But also not shy away from that message. It's awesome.
Yeah, I picked it up at I haven't read it yet, but I picked up as half price at a bookstore. I'm like, yes, please.
Oh
So,
yeah, no, I think it's one of the best source books I've read rather, not written. And I want to write a little game to run in it. I've got some ideas, and of course I want to draw the maps for my game. So it's not going to happen until I've drawn maps of you know, various speakeasies and ballrooms that I want to cover. But that would be fun. So at some point, you know, when I'm close to running that game, because you'll see a load of 20s Harlem maps appearing.
Yeah, there's a game called Gangbusters. I don't know if you've heard of that. And it's set.
Ooh, I like the cover. 20s.
Yes.
No, that looks awesome. Never heard of it.
So it's an old game, but the source book, so it's got a map of it's Chicago, but they're not calling it Chicago. And there's a guy who did a BX revision of the rules, which you can get pretty cheap. So if you're wanting to do some of that, there's also as for source work.
Not enough time, is there? That I might have to see if I can hunt that out. That looks awesome.
Well, I think even if you just pick up off the, I think you probably pick the PDFs up cheap, and if nothing else, just as a source material.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll check that out. But yeah, so at some point, that's another little game. I'm not running any games at the moment, but that's another little game I want to run when I'm not. I need to make some space in my map drawing to draw some maps for me.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah, well, there's all these interesting projects coming along, and I'm doing those, and I'm like, I mean, I've got quite a few maps I'd like to draw from Harlem in the 20s that haven't been drawn. That'd be cool. There's a famous ballroom, and there's maps online sketching out how it would have looked, and I think that would be quite a cool place to center a cooler Cthulhu.
So you plan on selling these maps later?
I'm just happy to draw them if someone decides. I mean, I don't know. I'm not much into marketing. If I wrote a scenario and it played well and the maps were good, I might think of working with someone to package it up into something useful. But I'd be completely happy if I ran a game, everyone loved it, and I throw the maps out there and people are able to use those maps. And it probably would generate me some more commissions, which I'm not short of anyway. So
Right.
So yeah, but it's like it's finding time. But it'd be cool. I mean, so this ballroom, the Savoy Ballroom, was a legendary ballroom for black dancers mostly. There were some white people went to dance as well in the late 20s, and I think it would be a really interesting 20s map if you could center a Call of Cthulhu game around that place. And it's not mapped. I mean, there's like the sketches online and old handouts of seating plans, but a really nice role-playing detailed map of that would be a really cool historical addition to Call of Cthulhu.
Oh yeah, and definitely, since so much of that material does kind of seem to center around that time period.
Sorry, I've just heard something moving here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no, it's slightly worrying. I live in a very old house, like hundreds of years old, and someone's moved into the loft. I don't know if it's a squirrel or mice. And
Oh.
I'm like, that's the trouble with very old houses. You can't block up all of the entrances, but it'll be fine. We've got a cat. Cat, do your job.
You only have one job.
Yeah, exactly. Pay you all this cat food. What are you doing?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting with those older houses, and I think it's kind of also interesting. It seemed like Belfast, where I was at, most of it was newer, but I think when you go on to probably to the England side of things, it's just for us 100. I think somebody said something like in Europe, 200 miles is a long distance, but in America, 200 years is a long time.
Yeah, I like that. That is true. Well, I mean, this house is 300 or 400 years old, and it used to be a forge. And at some point, I should draw a map of it as well and use it as a D&D forge and cottage. But
oh, really?
yeah, it used to be a forge. It's not anymore, obviously, because long ago people stopped forging things. But
oh, they still forge. It's just the hammers are the size of, they're huge.
Yeah. But you don't have a forge per village.
No.
No. Whereas, and it's cool. In the garden, you're sort of doing gardening, and you'll end up digging up a horseshoe or something. So it's cool.
So was this strictly this forge? So it wasn't. So do you know if they were using was it like an automated or bigger forge, or was it just somebody?
No. I think it was. I think it stopped being a forge 100 years ago, and I think it was making horseshoes and bits of plows and probably not weapons, probably just tools for farmers in the village for hundreds of years, and then people didn't need that because they had factories, and it stops making those things and becomes a residence.
Well, like nails used to be the same way. They used to hammer those out.
Right, exactly. Yeah, found loads. I've got a handful of presumably old nails, almost rusted away, that I've found in the ground while trying to weed the vegetable patch.
I have a friend who is, have these interesting friends just involved in a lot of things. So he bought an old. He was very much into Civil War and artifacts, and he bought an old home, and he so the outhouse, there used to be an outhouse, it hadn't been used in decades, but he excavated that, hoping to find, like, they would throw things away there, hoping to find some artifacts of note, but he didn't really find a whole lot.
Well, I kind of get it though. It's a bit like a D&D game, the fun of like, will you find something? Will you discover the big treasure? I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he tried to treat it like an archaeological dig. He, sectioned it off and just did layer by layer by layer. So,
Yeah, why not? I had a friend who discovered that she had a basement she didn't know about. That's like the coolest thing, like to knock through and suddenly realize, oh, there's a whole room down here. I mean, it was apparently moldy and wet and awful, but I don't know. It's like mini dungeon crawl.
right, you got to come
Uh,
up with why is that here and why is it not connected to the house?
well, and just occasionally there's something really interesting, isn't there? I mean, there was, it was quite late on. Someone found in a basement a collection, a series of underground caverns and rooms that have been there for hundreds of years. I can't remember which city it was. It's somewhere, might be Turkey, but anyway, it happened.
Yeah, well, they would tend to, if I recall correctly, then they used to just like cities would get torn down from war and then they would just build
Yeah,
on top of it. So it just would be layer after layers, actually different people building different layers of cities.
yeah, it's pretty exciting. See, there you are, more plot stuff for all of the games, more
Yeah,
mystery.
yeah, actually, right. And that's the other thing I kind of would like to have done. I never did do is get more into so I kind of enjoy the Hyperborean, not really play like Conan. It's kind of the
Oh, cool.
but I mean, if you look at just like real world places, and if you do like a low magic setting, there is some really neat places of that people have made, whether it's in Southeast Asia where they've carved a temple out of this rock. It's like how did you do that? Or people building walled buildings along the sides of a cliff.
Yeah,
On the cliff, it's just like that's crazy.
it is crazy. And yeah, no, and amazing places. And I love to digitally find these places because they're always such awesome inspiration for the maps you're drawing. With future maps, upcoming maps, I'd like to push away from the architecture that we're used to seeing in the maps, and finding sources of imagery from elsewhere in the world where they built things differently. It's really interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine the architecture we're used to. It's kind of interesting because I think D&D created its own genre.
Yeah,
And it's like, for instance, doing a post-apocalyptic game, I just did a random dungeon generator, small one for what I want to do, but that doesn't look like. And what I'm going to do is probably just have it actually redone, but it's kind of what we want to see. But real maps of places don't look like that at all.
no, but and it doesn't matter for a lot of games. And
No, it doesn't. But it's just. But I'm just saying it's like. But we've done is we've taken that as kind of been the touch point, and everything projects from that point on, and we don't question it.
yeah, no, and actually a lot of the time you don't want the map to be that realistic, like because
Right.
it's often a caricature of the dungeon or the village or the country. It's often a caricature of something that would be real. The city maps are a good example. They're rarely as big as they need to be. It's a condensed cartoon of a version of the city. I don't know if you've played any of the Grand Theft Auto games, but their
No.
cities, well, I mean, their cities are inspiring what they've done, but they're really clever. They are a cartoon version of the real city that they're mimicking, in that they'll have like one road with a ending that represents the whole of the suburban miles and miles of a real city, and they've condensed it down. And I find that's what you end up doing with maps. You end up kind of representing in a kind of mini version of things, because the real map would sprawl and not be as interesting to look at. It it it
What I
you
think
could.
too is not just even interesting to look at. It's like functionality wise, it may not be fun.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to have miles and miles of suburbs. You only need one bit to have the suburb encounter, and you know, whatever you've got. And so I definitely recognize this idea of, it's not just about realism, it's about what do you actually want to use it for. You want to have locations that are different enough and that you've got some geography in between and details that express some character. Do you really need the right number of houses and streets and
Right.
square miles of urban area to be realistic? Probably not.
Well, it's kind of interesting, even with role-playing games and with mechanics, some people, you know, will criticize a game for being, you know, maybe not realistic, or maybe even they call it like power fantasy,
Mm.
but without really realizing that, you know, what game really is realistic, and what game really isn't a power fantasy.
No, I mean, you're right. That none of them are realistic. And anyway, how can they be realistic? You've got a games master choosing what happens. You know,
Yeah.
it's a story. I don't think they all have to be power fantasies, though.
No, but I mean, it really was somebody from like first edition D&D complaining about fifth edition D&D, saying it's just
Yeah,
a power fantasy. But I'm like, well, I
yeah,
think when you go to you play those modules like against the giants and you're fighting giants, you're engaging in a power fantasy.
yeah. Fair play, and that is what that's about. But you know, there are other games that are not. And I again, Cthulhu. I mean, if you're if you're trying to become powerful, you're the big bad.
Yeah, and I do agree. And I was kind of overgeneralized, but even there, you're still probably a better person than you are in real life.
True, you probably are.
And you can end the world. You can do some crazy stuff. We're playing in a Call of Cthulhu game, my son and I, with his friend, his dad.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, so we summoned Haunting Horror. So we knew this person. We had to go take care of it. I think, why are we doing this? We got the spell. We never done spells before, and my son pulled it off. I don't know how, which ended up like fixing everything. It took care of everything, but he lost. He had to roll a D10 for sanity loss.
Sanity.
Yeah, sanity
Yeah.
loss. He rolled a 10, and he had to roll a D20, and he rolled a 20, so he lost 30 points of sanity right then and there.
And that's spellcasting for you. See, yeah, you can't. That's what I mean. If you try and be powerful in Cthulhu, you're the big bad before you know it. You're mad and bad, and bringing about the end of the world for good
Yeah,
reasons.
but I think, again, because somebody's talking about simulation, it's just, where is the fun? What is it that you're trying to do? You know,
Yeah.
if your game is about privation and struggle, then then every ration counts. If all you're really wanting to do is just, you know, kill some dragons, then why are you counting arrows and in rations?
Don't know, because in the game I was just playing in, the GM was counting arrows a little bit, so the archer spent every second of downtime making arrows until we had a boat of arrows. And
The
like,
thing is, you driving behavior with your actions.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's unintended consequences.
And it's like, now we need bags of holding and
For all those arrows.
something to stop the arrows piercing the bag inside, because we don't want to go looking for them on the astral plane, because that's not fun either. Can we just get on with killing things?
Yeah, it's there's also different games that have had different ways of handling inventory, trying to make it a little more fun. Or I think most GMs just don't pay attention. It's just,
Yeah, I don't think it's worth paying attention. I think it would, again, if you're doing a survival horror, whatever,
yes,
you know, then yeah, that's interesting, because then you give the players the chance to win by being creative and saving resources. But yeah, not in your. It just doesn't come into the heroic action films, does it? Oh, I've run out of arrows.
yeah, you don't read stories about them carrying, you know, horses laden with arrows and with spears and extra shields, and each fighter carrying all. It's like, no, they traveled, you know, reasonably light, and you can reuse the arrows or whatnot. But it's just it is funny.
And sometimes you can end up including some realism, and it breaks everything. I heard a friend told me about a game that he played in where it was in Middle Earth, and they'd I don't know, gone to some dungeon or defeated something, and then the treasure room, the big treasure that they were after, was behind a massive mithril door. How are they going to get through this mithril door that's impenetrable? Well, they managed to get the door off the hinges. They didn't even look at the treasure. They just carted the door off and wrecked the local economy, because it turned out the door was worth more than anything. The GM's like, what have I done? And they made a point of not even going into the treasure room, because they just thought
exactly,
it cannot
nothing could be worth
possibly
more
be
than
anything.
Yep.
It's like, oops.
Yeah, it is funny. And I think the thing is, I had a friend who Ralph, he said they like killed a dragon, players did, but then they had to figure out ways of getting the loot out of there, which required hiring servants and mule trains, and I mean, it turned into a logistical nightmare, wrecking the economy along the way. And in the end, they're like worse off than they started.
Is that fun? I mean,
I think they particularly did, but not every table would. But yeah.
No, fair enough. I mean, yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see that not being fun.
Because like Traveller, with Traveller, which is a science fiction RPG,
yeah,
you can play a game that's strictly economics. You can be buying and selling, and that'd be the entire game if you wanted.
see, I think that could be fun if that was what, if that was what you were set up to be trying to do, and if you're into role playing and deals, but the game would have to be for that. I think I'd quite like that.
And you get a spreadsheet going, and you and then but you get the right people. That is a lot of fun. And then whenever you land in port, that's where whatever nonsense takes place. That liven things up.
Yeah, sometimes throwing a challenge like that at the players can be cool if they're not expecting it. I had quite a nice encounter in the game I was running where they turn up late. They could have got there in time, but they weren't. They messed around. And so they turn up late to the village that they should have been protecting, and the village has been decimated by an attack, and there's all these people that are injured. And instead of just being like, okay, you spend a few spells and people are healed, they worked out they didn't have enough resources to heal everyone, and so they got into a whole triaging and organizing the wounded and repairing the village, and they loved it. They were all over it. They felt like complete heroes. And so I had it laid out, like kind of just figuring out who was on death's door and who needed the limited healing they had was part of the challenge. And it was, there was some energy to it, because they had only minutes before some people were going to be dying, and depending on their injuries. So getting organized and not laying on hands the first sprained ankle they found.
Well, I think if you could take whatever there, and if you kept good notes, you might have a board game there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Orc attack triage.
Well, it's that probably too much unlike the pandemic, but the idea is right. You're trying to save as many people at the end.
Yeah, and then who do you save? Do you save the guard so he can defend against the next attack, or do you save the the herbalist? Who how do you make these decisions? It's good. It's good fun throwing that challenge. It's like you have 200 people, half of them are unconscious, a quarter of them are already dead. What do you do?
If you're familiar with the TV show MASH.
Yeah, MASH.
Somebody came up, I think, with an RPG that is MASH themed.
Work.
I think.
God, there's a role-playing game for everything, isn't there?
Yeah, they use the Powered by Apocalypse. It's MASH role-playing game. I think. Yeah. I don't know how good it is. I don't know if it even got released, but
I think it would be as good as the group of players you had if they were into it.
Well, I think what it does is it probably condenses some of the details.
Yeah, if the players were into the satire, that could be quite cool. The kind of craziness of of war and the stupidity of some of the things that they had to do. If they're into a bit like kind of Paranoia, which I liked, but no one else I played with liked. If you get the humor.
Yeah, and I've never played. Oh, I played once, but I think there's like 3 or 4 different types of way people play Paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, I've only played it once. I've never run it.
So some people, I think originally it was pretty straight, as far as just like not. I mean, just like serious, like, and
so
then
only the GM's laughing,
yeah,
or the
exactly, and
director,
then
or what is it, or the central computer, or whatever it's called in.
yeah, but then you have the other extreme where it's just like where I played at a place where they had like bottles of juice and different things, and they would give hand props, and you know your
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you read the scenarios where players are trying to cover up the fact that all of the food they're eating is reprocessed criminals, and like, yeah, you'd have to be into it, I think.
But I think there's another mode that's like in between, the one that's just absolute, cuckoo, and the other one that's just pretty much like this is dystopian society, and we're just it's kind of like I've not seen The Life of Brian, but I mentioned it's just like well, I mean, I have seen Life of Brian. It's more like Life of Brian, which is like this is just a commentary to just full blown just bonkers.
Yeah, no, I think it's another one where if you dropped some players in who want to be powerful, and all of them are just only going to be happy if their characters increase in power, which is a completely valid way of wanting to play, it is not going to work. But if you have some that are enjoying the satire and stupidity of it and trying to solve a puzzle where it's impossible, yeah, you're not allowed in this zone. This is a green zone. You do not have green access pass. How do I get green access pass? You have to go into the green zone to request it. Help me.
Yeah, it's a little too much like real life.
But yeah, I was gonna say it sounds a bit like the day job. But yeah, it's yeah, could be fun.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just like anything, it's just getting the right players. I really think nothing else really matters. System, game, setting doesn't matter. It's just the players and the GM. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, that for sure. It's 100% true.
Yeah, so I've played games I've not liked the system at all, but I just had such a good time. It didn't really matter.
Yeah. So yeah, only the players and the map matter.
And the
Nothing
map, yes,
else.
exactly. and again, you are. I guess we're getting kind of hitting close to end of this edge of the space time continuum here.
Yeah.
So commission wise, you are open for commissions.
People should contact me. I have ended up with quite a backlog at the moment, so I don't think I've really got any space till next year.
Okay.
But people should chat to me, and we'll see if there's a good overlap. I'm not so much like just putting people in a queue. I'm looking for things where I think, oh yeah, I could really do that well, and I'm into that. And so let's have a chat and figure out if the overlap's awesome.
That makes sense, because you're in a position now where you can just say, because you're looking for things to inspire. You've got enough work. You're just saying what things can push and inspire that you find satisfaction out of.
And I want with most of the maps to be pushing something forward, so doing something new or different. I don't just want to keep churning out the same kind of map.
Right. You've done poo already, so no more poo commissions.
I mean, I'm sure there's more things I could do with a poo dungeon. I mean, anyone who can come to me with a more bizarre, that's the challenge. To anyone who's listening, come to me with a more bizarre request than a poo dungeon. And there've been some up there. Yeah.
But I'm at the pinnacle. I never even really.
I don't know. I think you'll be jostling for first place with the reasons that made me put a rowing boat in a library in a map. But anyway.
Yeah, it was there was a person who was originally going to do art for this a while back. And it just didn't work out. But we had some discussions going back and forth about the details of these creatures feeding the king that's laying there, in a state of stupor, and going through the gory, nasty details. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm having this discussion with another person.
It's good. It's good. It's
But
good.
anyway.
You need to have that conversation somewhere in public so people can only get half of it. Like you're missing an opportunity for just completely confusing people.
Yes, exactly. Well, anyway, Chloe, thank you very much. The maps are great. Kickstarter's ending soon, and it really helped the book. I think it
Good.
definitely.
Well, yeah, it was super fun to do, and yeah, I hope it's all successful and well
And the
received.
reason I wanted another person to do the map, besides I can't do a map, is I asked you for, I think, some extra stuff just to throw in, and that caused me to write more things.
I love it when writers are inspired and go on to write parts because of random details I've put in really just to fill in blank bits of the map.
Yeah, so the bit where this creature has this ability to manipulate flesh and keeps pools of bodies for using as either for entertainment to talk to, or use their body parts to make them individual living organisms. That was because you left space.
Oh, that's awesome. Gross and wonderful.
Yes.
And that's what you want. It's good.
Yes. So
I
anyway,
love it.
well, thanks for talking with me, and then hopefully droves of people will come your way with very interesting commissions that you'll have to think hard and long. And
I hope so. Yeah, no, definitely. The more interesting, the better. Or perhaps you don't think it's interesting, and I have an interesting idea of what to do with it. Because there's some styles of map I want to draw that I haven't done yet. So yeah.
Well, do you want to throw any of that out there?
Yeah, no, I'm interested in. There's a lot of really, really interesting older maps and the styles of those, and particularly looking at the Far East, some of the old Chinese and Japanese maps from 600 years ago, kind of just trying to copy their woodcut style, but the particular
Right.
colors. I think that could look really interesting, like nothing we've seen for fantasy maps. That would be cool. So that's one that's high up on my agenda. Yeah.
All right. Well, who knows? Maybe somebody listening is got a need, or it'll spark an imagination, and they'll say, I need to write something for that just so I can have one of those maps.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. Well, thanks again,
All right.
Chloe.
Nice to speak to you. Bye.